And thank you for joining us today. This is the Office of School Support and Improvement webinar for the Continuous Improvement Plan in GMS. And we're going to go through these slides. Take us about 30 minutes to 45 minutes to get through this. And again, if you're joining us for this and did not attend the regional meetings, we have our contact information at the end of the presentation if you have any questions. Our agenda for today, we're going to go through the planning portion, just a little revisit of what you've done in the past. Then we're going to go through the tabs in the Continuous Improvement Plan in GMS. We're going to talk a little bit about the EDGE grant. And we're going to note some resources we have for you and talk just a little bit about the funding. And today's webinar is presented by myself, Zada Sery, Grant Management Specialist, and Jan Foreman, our School Support Specialist. For the Continuous Improvement Cycle, this section is focused on planning for implementation. And just to revisit some planning that you did earlier in your regional meetings, the schools were asked to develop some activities before they filled out their plan, and those were to identify and prioritize the needs in a needs assessment, compile the school-wide data picture, develop SMART goals, and determine what evidence-based interventions and practices they wanted to use. And those, we do have presentations for those on our website if you would like to look at those two presentations. And now we're going to talk about the Continuous Improvement Plan in GMS. I'm going to walk you through how to get there, and then Jan's going to talk to you about the content that we would like to see on the individual tabs. So when you log into GMS, which is available to you on the single sign-on, you're going to click on GMS Access Select link. You're going to make sure that you're in fiscal year 2020. And then you're going to see a small black triangle next to the Continuous Improvement Plan. It's called a caret. If you click on that caret, it will expand the section and it will reveal your individual site plan. You'll click the blue open button to open that plan.
The Overview tab provides information regarding the due date of the CIP, which is September 30th, 2019. Requirements for the CIP formula funding, $50,000, and also requirements for the competitive grant funding, which we will discuss later. Note that all CSI sites will check the CIP formula funding box.
And be sure to click the blue Save button at the bottom of the page. Please remember that GMS does not automatically save. So you want to make sure that you save your information as you move through the plan.
The next tab is the Team tab, which identifies each team member and his or her role. Sites are required to have a minimum of 5 team members, and it is recommended to have no more than 10 members. Required members include the superintendent or a designee, the site principal, and 2 teachers which represent different content areas or grade levels at the site. Optional team members might be the special education teacher, English learner teacher, assistant administrators, instructional coach, parent. Please note that the person entering the plan in GMS is also a requirement. This may be one of the identified team members, a district office personnel, principal secretary. This will vary from site to site.
One of the things that we would like to point out on the different tabs inside GMS is the instructions. We had a stakeholder group that worked with us on the development of this plan, and one of their notes was to include clear and concise instructions on each tab. So you'll notice as we go through this plan, there are instructions available to you on each tab if you weren't able to attend the regional trainings with us.
The Data tab is a section to record applicable student assessment data for 3 content areas: reading, mathematics, and science. Firstly, identify the benchmarking tool or interim assessment tool. If different benchmarking tools are used for different grade levels, then indicate the tool and the grade level. Enter the percentage of students proficient or above for the site's applicable grade levels. The other grade levels may be left blank. Sites will update or amend the assessment data each quarter, beginning of year, middle of year, and end of year.
Sites will work with their specialists to determine if this page is required. Sites designated for chronic absenteeism may not need to complete this tab. The CIP is able to be submitted without this tab being complete.
Also on the Data tab is a narrative box to provide details regarding why a site may not have a benchmarking tool for reading, mathematics, and/or science. Check the box to open the narrative box. Sites are asked to describe how the site will choose a benchmarking tool and when the tool will be implemented. The Needs Assessment tab is completed based on the data gathered from the 9 Essential Elements Needs Assessment, school-wide data picture, and stakeholder surveys. The left column categorizes areas of focus: curriculum, instruction, and school culture. The areas of focus are actually the 3 pillars. We have academic performance 1, 2, and 3, learning environment 4, 5, and 6, and collaborative leadership elements 7, 8, and 9.
And as we move into these tabs where we have more and more information to input into the plan, one of the tips that we offer is for you to actually write out these sections in a Word document outside of the system, get them the way you want them, and then cut and paste into the system. That way, should the system have an error, a glitch, or kick you out, you won't lose any of the information.
The middle column is for identified strengths in those areas, and the right column contains the identified areas of focuses or challenges. List the focus areas that will be most impactful first. Districts and sites have developed mission and vision statements. Revisit the existing statements to see if the statements truly reflect the continuous school improvement efforts. Update, revise, and enter in the provided space. SMART goals are developed based on the site's needs assessment. SMART is an acronym that stands for specific, measurable, achievable, realistic, and time-bound. 2 SMART goals are required. A 3rd SMART goal is required for the competitive EDGE grant.
Once you have typed in the SMART goal, you'll select the applicable pillar and element from the drop-down menu. The site will enter the target date that works for them. SDE will not mandate that date. If again you select a target date and you need to revise it, you'll come back and revise that with an amendment. You can make as many amendments as you need. Once the SMART goal information is entered, it will be used to pre-populate the Action Steps tab, so the information will not need to be re-entered.
Located in the Plan tab is the Plan Narrative rubric. Use the rubric to determine the site's level of implementation and to develop the site's plan narrative. Remember that the plan must be at implementation level to receive OSDE final approval status. If the plan lacks the required implementation components, it will be returned for the necessary revision.
These components were pulled from a USDE presentation from July 2018. Most of the components are self-explanatory, but let's go over the rigorous review process and operational flexibility, since they are considered optional. If the site is going to use an external provider, whether it be consulting or instructional coaching, job-embedded PD, etc., USDE requires that the state ensure that sites have a rigorous review process in place for recruiting, screening, selecting, and evaluating those external providers. This component is intended to aid sites in only contracting with high-quality provider whose services are tailored to the identified needs of the site and can ultimately increase achievement at that site. Operational flexibility is when a district has policies or rules that apply to all the sites, such as a no out-of-state travel policy, block scheduling for middle schools, or all elementary schools use a certain math program. But one or more of those policies or rules impedes a site's ability to address the factors impacting their achievement issues. Operational flexibility is when the district lifts those policies or rules for that site. Maybe the site's special ed teachers need a specific professional development that is only offered out of state. Operational flexibility is allowing that out of state travel. Again, you would address these two if you're going to use external providers or if you're going to have those operational flexibility issues. If you don't have either of those, then you would omit them from your narrative.
As stated previously, use the rubric to develop and to compose the site's plan narrative.
And remember that your plan is based on your needs assessment and all the work that you have done. You do not need to list specific expenditures such as 25 computers bought for $200. We will address those items in the action steps and the budget. These are the action step tabs, which we discussed earlier in the goals tab. Once you enter the SMART goal, it auto-populates into this tab.
In the action plan tab, sites will list activities, practices, tasks that specifically support the applicable SMART goal.
So we have different columns in the action step tab, and the one we're going to touch on is the funding source column. Typically when you apply or create a plan for a specific funding source, you only talk about items that will be funded with those particular funds. For these action step tabs, we're asking that you simply put in the action steps that you need to meet that goal, not really concerned with the particular funding source that it's going to use. So in our example here on the screen, you'll see that we have an action step that's going to rely on some donations from some community partners. And that's perfectly fine because that is an action step to help meet that goal, even though it doesn't necessarily get funded with Project 515 funds. So again, those funding sources don't really matter in your action step process. It can be a variety of general funds, or it can be other federal funds, or it can even be a community partner.
The PD tab, Professional Development, is devoted to listing professional development activities planned that specifically support the SMART goals. The list will be amended quarterly or as needed to record date completed. There is absolutely no need to list the compliance professional development activities that districts are required to complete. Only list the professional development activities that are linked directly to your SMART goal and are identified in your action steps.
And once you enter the name of the professional development, the next column you'll see is the tentative date. This is a visual aid for you to see when your professional developments are taking place throughout your school year. The next column you'll see is a drop-down menu, and your choices are LEA, so those are going to be professional development opportunities provided by your local district or your neighboring district. SEA will be those professional developments provided by the state. And if it's neither of those, then you'll select external provider. The last column is the date completed. So as you have completed these professional development sessions, you'll come back in with an amendment and enter those dates. This is the supporting documentation tab. At this time, there is nothing required on this tab. We wanted to have this available to you in the plan so that as we move through the cohort, if there are things we do need uploaded, this tab is already in place for us. And the submit tab is the same as the other submit tabs in GMS. You're going to run your consistency check. If you're a principal, then you'll submit to your superintendent. If you're a superintendent, then you'll submit to OSDE. You also have the option of requesting a print job for your plan. There's two really great ways to use this feature. The first is when the plan itself is blank, you can request a print job using these instructions, and then it'll provide you with a PDF link that you can email out to your team members or maybe print off copies and provide those for your leadership team as you work to build the plan. Once you have completed the plan and submitted it, you can request another print job, and then you can capture all of the information that you've entered into your plan. Again, it's a PDF link that you can save on your computer or put in your Google folder or just have available to you as you make updates throughout the year. Now we're going to talk about the EDGE grant in GMS. This is the competitive grant.
Earlier, we discussed the CIP formula funding requirements. Let's look at the optional EDGE competitive grant requirements. The due date of September 30, 2019 is the same for both the CIP and the EDGE competitive grant. Sites that apply for the competitive grant will check the box. The EDGE competitive grant requirements are basically the same as the CIP formula funding, but are more extensive or go a little deeper. In number 1, grant applicants will submit a supplemental narrative and a proposed budget for the additional funding. And number 2, grant recipients will include Office of School Support and Improvement participation in its leadership team. Number 4, a third SMART goal is a requirement. Number 5, only strong or moderate evidence-based interventions may be implemented. And number 6, weekly PLC meetings are required. Number 9, the site will have monthly Office of School Support and Improvement partnership meetings.
If you decide to apply for the competitive EDGE grant, you will complete the EDGE grant tab. If you're not applying for the EDGE grant, you will leave this tab blank. In the top portion of this tab, you'll fill out the demographics of your school just by checking all the boxes that apply. In the middle section, you'll see a link for a supplemental narrative rubric, and then a link for a proposed budget. If either of these links do not work for you, please contact our office, either myself or your school support specialist, and we will get you copies of those forms. Do not let that be a barrier to you applying for this grant. The bottom of the page, you will see an upload feature. This is where we would like you to upload your supplemental narrative and your proposed budget so that it can be reviewed in the competitive grant process.
Just like the grant requirements are the same, but are more extensive or deeper than the formulaic CIP, the same is applicable to the supplemental grant narrative. Use the EDGE grant rubric to guide the development of the supplemental narrative and determine if the site's proposed plan clearly defines the site's level of implementation. As you read about each component, note the emphasis on achievable and long-term sustainability. In brief, how will the site sustain the described practices or services after the grant funding has ended?
And this slide gives you a breakdown of the points for each one of the sections on the supplemental grant narrative. So we wanted you to be aware of how they were being scored as you were writing your supplemental narrative. And this is the proposed budget template. It's just a basic Excel document. So again, if you have any issues or problems with it, just contact us and we'll get you another copy. But it has the expenditure description, the SMART goal action step that expenditure is aligned to, and then the proposed amount up to $200,000. And here's an example of how we would like that budget to look. Again, this will be reviewed by an independent competitive grant review panel So we're wanting the expenditure descriptions to be specific enough that that reviewer knows what you're wanting to spend the funds on. And then in the second column where it talks about the goal and the action step, that'll give the reviewer more information of where to look for that expenditure if they have any questions. And again, you will write your third SMART goal, and it will populate the third set of action steps. Just like the other two did, you'll select the pillar and element and choose a target date, just like you did with the other two SMART goals. If you're applying for the EDGE grant, you will fill out the assurances tab. Go ahead and read the assurances, and you will agree to them by check marking the small box at the top, and it will auto-populate the box at the bottom. Be sure and save the page, and then you'll submit the grant as usual. So we do have some resources for you. We have a sample plan of the continuous improvement plan that is available. We can send that out to you via email. You can use that as a resource when you're filling out your own plan. We have a SMART goals presentation as well as an evidence-based intervention presentation. Those are both very beneficial to review before you start filling out your plan. If you are at Engage OK next July, or excuse me, this July, we will have a technical assistance room. So you can bring your computer, bring your notes, come on in and talk to us, and we can walk through any questions or issues that you're having. And then, of course, anyone at the Office of School Support and Improvement is willing to help. Just email us, call us, or stop by for a visit. And then if you have turnover in your office or you have new folks that are not familiar with GMS, we do offer help desk and training. So if you will call my number specifically, we'll get you the assistance you need with GMS. And then our school support specialists will be sending out monthly next steps, and there'll be checklists with the things to complete for that particular month. They include reminders, registration links, and tools and resources for you as you move through this process. To remind you of the funding, you received planning funds in the spring of FY19, and those, anything that was not claimed will carry over into the next year, and you will receive your implementation funds, approximately $50,000, in the beginning of July 2019 for the FY20 year. We believe that the competitive funds will be awarded in late fall of this year. Again, if you have any questions about anything in this presentation, you can always contact your assigned school support specialist, or you can contact me at the information that's listed on the slide. Thank you.